The alert arrived in the dead of night, while Commander Jack Morrison slept in his room on the Earth defense ship Starward. His device buzzed 3 times before he woke. He grabbed it and read the words that would turn everything he understood about humans and space upside down. The Volanth Collective requested a meeting. This felt odd because the Volanth ruled most of known space and had never cared about Earth. They were a group of 12 alien races who had explored the cosmos for countless ages. Humans had only learned to travel faster than light 60 years back. To them, Earth was a forgotten corner filled with simple beings who had barely explored their own star system. Jack looked at the message once more. The gathering would take place at Station Orionis, a giant floating metropolis at the far edge of the void. Human vessels could not carry weapons. Human fighters could not wear protective suits. The Volanth insisted this be a calm discussion and nothing else. Admiral Ben Carter gave approval within hours. He picked Lisa Harper for the mission because she was Earth's finest expert in alien speech. She had devoted 15 years to learning alien tongues and could speak 7 without trouble. She was also clever enough to see details others overlooked. The trip to Station Orionis lasted 3 weeks. During this journey, Lisa saw something that troubled her greatly. Every alien race they passed along the route showed them an odd mix of dread and honor. At fuel stops, other beings would move aside and bow their heads when humans passed by. At marketplaces, sellers would give their finest items without charge and reject money. Lisa questioned one about this. The seller was a Torvelian, a race that resembled tall birds with 4 limbs. He gazed at her with his bright golden eyes and spoke only one word before leaving. Guardians. When they reached Station Orionis, the enormous structure left Jack breathless. It was bigger than any metropolis on Earth, a spinning ring of steel and brightness hanging in the black emptiness. Millions of creatures from countless races lived and labored there. It was the heart of galactic society. The human group was led to the high chamber by armed escorts who kept their gap. The chamber was vast, with seats climbing in circles around a center stage. Leaders from all 12-member races of the Union were waiting. At the top seat sat a creature that Lisa had only studied in old writings. It was the first speaker, one of a race so ancient they had no title. They simply named themselves the First. The first speaker stood tall and slim with flesh that changed hues like oil on liquid. Its eyes were pitch black and endless, carrying the burden of ages of knowledge. When it spoke, its voice rang in a way that made Lisa feel the sound inside her mind. Welcome, humans. We have awaited this moment for quite some time. Jack moved forward and bowed with respect. He thanked the Union for the chance to meet and shared his desire that this would mark the start of partnership between their worlds. The first speaker watched without emotion. Then it made its demand. We wish for you to hand over the sleeper to us. Jack felt confused. He glanced at Lisa, who signaled no understanding. Neither had ever heard of something named the sleeper. Jack asked the first speaker to clarify. What came next was information that transformed everything Lisa believed about Earth and human origins. The first speaker turned on a light display that filled the chamber's center. It revealed pictures of Earth, but not the Earth Lisa recognized. This was Earth from 60,000 years past, when humans lived in caves and hunted with stone blades. The seas were in different spots. The land masses had slightly altered forms, and under the Pacific Ocean, something enormous was visible through the depths. It was some kind of building made of substance that was neither metal nor rock. It glowed with a soft shine that seemed to exist in shades human vision could not fully see. Lisa felt her blood freeze as she stared at it. The first speaker described that this building was a jail. Inside it, something rested. Something that had been locked away before the first stars had burned. Something so deadly that the oldest races in space had constructed an entire world around it just to keep it trapped. That world was Earth. And humanity, the first speaker continued, had been made for one reason: to watch over the jail without realizing they were watching it. Lisa wanted to protest that this was impossible. She wanted to argue that humans had grown naturally over ages. But the pictures before her were too sharp, too accurate to be lies. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a peculiar knowing, as if some piece of her had always understood this reality. Jack raised the clear question. If this jail had been on Earth for so long, why were they only discovering this now? What had shifted? The first speaker's colors moved to a darker tone. There is a race older than all others in this galaxy. They are named the Kthari. They have observed cultures appear and vanish for billions of cycles. They move freely through the stars, watching and nodding but never meddling. There is only one place in the entire cosmos that they will not approach, one place that they dread. Lisa already understood the answer before the first speaker revealed it. Earth. The Kthari stay away from your world because they understand what rests under your waters. They understand what will occur if it ever awakens, and they understand that humanity is the only barrier between that being and the end of everything that lives. The chamber grew quiet. Jack looked at his crew, then back at the first speaker. He asked what they should do with this knowledge. The first speaker leaned closer, and for the first time, Lisa noticed something like urgency in its old eyes. You must choose what you are ready to give up to keep the galaxy protected because the sleeper is starting to stir, and if it emerges, nothing in this cosmos will remain. Admiral Ben Carter had been away from service for 5 years when the message arrived. He was 73 years old and living in a simple home near the water in Maine. He spent his time catching fish and reading books about the past. He had earned his calm after 40 years of military duty. But when the secure signal came with the highest secret rating he had ever witnessed, Ben understood his peaceful life was finished. He studied the mission team's findings 3 times. Then he sat quietly for a long while, gazing at the water and thinking about his ancestor. George Carter had been a Navy officer in 1947. He had commanded a secret journey to a spot in the Pacific that appeared on no chart. What he discovered there had been hidden in the highest secrecy ever since. Only 7 people on the planet knew the reality, and Ben was among them. He had received the secret when his father passed. His father had received it from George. The knowledge had traveled through 3 family lines, and Ben had always wished he would pass before he had to act on it. But now the aliens understood, and that altered everything. Ben traveled to Washington and spoke with the president in a chamber that officially did not exist. He told her what his ancestor had discovered under the Pacific. He revealed to her the pictures that George had captured. Images so disturbing they had been sealed in storage for nearly 400 years. The pictures revealed a doorway. It was massive, nearly a mile across, and it was built of a substance that matched nothing in known science. Odd symbols filled its face, writing in a tongue that came before human culture by ages. Scientists who had examined the doorway over time had lost their minds trying to decode those symbols. Some had ended their own existence. Others had simply walked into the water and never came back. But the most disturbing thing about the doorway was not its dimensions, or its strange material, or its impossible writing. It was what could be detected on the far side. George Carter had pressed his ear to the doorway during that first journey. He had detected breathing, slow, heavy, steady breathing, like something huge sleeping in the black beyond. He had also detected something else, something he had noted in his last journal words before he died. It speaks, even in its rest it speaks. And if you hear long enough, you begin to grasp what it is telling you. That is when you must flee. Ben shared all of this with the president. He told her about the research posts that had been placed near the doorway over time. He told her about the scientists who had examined it and the fighters who had protected it. He told her about the things they had learned and the things they had sacrificed. The president heard without talking. When Ben stopped, she raised one question. What does it desire? Ben moved his head. No one understands. Perhaps it desires freedom. Perhaps it desires to destroy everything that lives. Perhaps it desires something we cannot even picture. All we understand is that it must never wake. While Ben met with the president, Lisa Harper was doing her own research on the opposite side of the globe. The Volanth had allowed her into their history records, and she was looking through files that covered millions of cycles. What she discovered was both amazing and frightening. Throughout human history, certain people had been pulled to the Pacific. Artists had created images of beings that should not live, monsters with too many eyes and forms that twisted in impossible ways. Math experts had solved problems that led nowhere except madness. Holy people and mystics had talked of something sleeping under the waves, something that would one day emerge and finish all things. Lisa discovered mentions in every human culture. The old Polynesians had named it the Dreaming Dark. The Japanese had tales of a god that rested under the sea. The Greeks had spoken of something older than the Titans, something that even Zeus feared. Every culture that had grown near the Pacific had some form of the same tale, but the strangest finding was something Lisa discovered in the Volanth records. Based on their histories, the Kthari had come to Earth once, long before humans existed. They had arrived to inspect the jail and confirm the lock was working. What they discovered had upset them so greatly that they had never come back. The lock was failing. Slowly, over billions of cycles, the thing inside was pushing against its cage. The Kthari had figured that the jail would someday break. They had looked for an answer and discovered only one chance. They required a race that could strengthen the lock without realizing they were doing it. They required a race that would grow naturally on Earth and become tied to the jail through their very being. They required guardians. So they had planted triggers, hidden patterns placed in the building blocks of the simple creatures that would someday become human. These triggers would turn on whenever the thing inside the jail moved. They would create a certain type of power that would make the lock stronger and keep the doorway shut. That power, Lisa understood with rising dread, was created by human feeling. Every act of caring, every moment of bravery, every wish and desire, and worry that any human had ever felt was actually strength being fed into the jail lock. Humanity's entire reason for being was a living seal. At that moment, thousands of miles distant, a young worker named Danny Price was looking at his computer display in shock. He worked at a deep water research post near the Mariana Trench, examining ground movement on the sea bottom. What he was witnessing made no logic. There was ground activity near the trench, but it was not random. The rhythms were too regular, too steady. Danny ran the information through every study program he had. The answers were always identical. The ground activity matched the rhythm of a heartbeat. Something under the water was alive, and based on the growing power of the signals, it was starting to wake. Danny reached for his device to share his discovery. Before he could send the message, his station entrance opened, and 3 people in dark clothes entered. They had no badges, they carried no arms, but their eyes held a weight that made Danny's blood freeze. "We must discuss what you have discovered, and then you must make a decision." Danny looked at his readings one final time, then he stood and followed them into the dark. Lisa Harper woke in a location that was not her room. She was standing in a huge, empty area filled with soft, pale light. There was no ground under her feet, but she did not drop. There were no barriers around her, but she did not feel open. It was as if she lived in the space between seconds, hanging in a place that was not quite real. Then they came. The Kthari did not have forms in any way Lisa could grasp. They were patterns that moved and changed, geometric designs that folded into themselves in ways that made her eyes hurt and her head throb. Watching them straight was like trying to stare at the sun. Watching them sideways was like trying to recall a dream. They spoke, and their voices were like melody and numbers blended into something fresh. Lisa grasped them not through her ears, but through something deeper, something that lived in the gap between her ideas. "We have waited for one of your kind to be prepared. You are the first in 10,000 years." Lisa attempted to speak, but her mouth would not function in this location. She thought her questions instead, and the Kthari responded. They shared with her the history of everything. Before the stars lived, before matter had shaped, before time itself had meaning, there were 2 powers that existed in the void. One of these powers wanted to build. It wanted to make structures and patterns and designs that would expand and shift and become something lovely. The other power wanted to erase. It wanted to reduce everything to emptiness, to delete existence itself, and bring the cosmos back to the pure nothing that had lived before anything started. These 2 powers had battled a conflict that lasted longer than forever. The conflict finished not with victory, but with capture. The erasing power was too strong to end, so the building power had locked it away in jails scattered across what would become the universe. These jails were hidden in the centers of stars, in the hearts of worlds, in the gaps between dimensions. The jail under Earth's water held the most dangerous of all these captives. The Kthari named it the Hollow. It was a being that did not simply end life, it erased. Wherever it moved, reality itself became a wound that would never mend. Things that the Hollow touched did not die, they stopped ever having lived at all. Lisa felt cold fear spreading through her thoughts. She asked why the Kthari were sharing this with her. She asked what they wanted her to do. The Kthari's patterns moved to something that might have been grief. We built you, your race. We planted the triggers that would become humanity because we knew the jail would someday weaken. We required guardians who could strengthen the lock without grasping what they were doing. Lisa recalled what she had learned from the Valanth files, the hidden triggers, the power created by human feeling. But the Kthari were sharing something more now, something darker. Every human who has ever lived has been a tool against the Hollow. Every vision you see, every melody you create, every moment of caring or bravery or desire creates the power that keeps the lock strong. Your entire race exists for one reason, to watch the jail. Lisa wanted to feel rage. She wanted to yell at these old beings for making humanity as nothing more than living seals. But she could not find rage in this location. She could only find acceptance. The Kthari went on. But there is something we did not anticipate, something we could not have known. They revealed to her images, then human history playing in rapid speed, conflicts and peace agreements, creativity and melody, scientific breakthroughs, moments of terrible cruelty and moments of stunning kindness. The whole messy, lovely, wild story of humanity showed before her eyes. You were meant to be simple. You were meant to be steady, but you grew beyond our plan. You became something more than guardians. You became builders yourselves. You made cultures. You raised questions, you reached for the stars, the pattern moved again, and that is why we dread you. Lisa did not grasp it. The Kthari clarified, the Hollow senses you are there. It has felt your power pressing against its cage for thousands of cycles. At first it attempted to break the lock through strength. That did not succeed. So it altered its approach. It started to speak. The Hollow could not leave its jail, but it could push its ideas through the cracks in the lock. It could shape the thoughts of humans who came too near. It could plant notions that would spread like sickness through human society. Notions that would make humans stop being human. The Kthari revealed to her the design. Throughout history, there had been movements that attempted to remove feeling, beliefs that said emotions were weakness, systems that demanded perfect obedience and the destruction of individual thinking. These were not natural human developments. They were the Hollow's efforts to weaken the lock from inside. If humans ever stopped dreaming, the lock would break. If humans ever stopped hopping, the jail would open. If humans ever stopped being the wild, emotional, unpredictable beings they were, the Hollow would be loose. Lisa finally grasped it. You do not dread us because we are threatening. You dread us because we are the only barrier between the Hollow and everything else. If we fail, the entire cosmos dies. The Kthari's response was simple, yes. Lisa woke in her bed with tears flowing down her face. She grabbed her device and contacted Jack Morrison. She shared everything. When she stopped, he was quiet for a long while. Then he said the words that would shift the path of human history. We must tell everyone, not just the leaders. Everyone. The whole planet must know what we are and what we are protecting. Because if the Hollow is attempting to make us stop being human, then the best protection is to be more human than ever. Lisa agreed. But before they could move, her device buzzed with an urgent alert. The Valanth Collective had just named Earth a danger to galactic safety. A group of warships was gathering at the edge of the star system. They had 48 hours before the strike started. The Valanth group was bigger than anything humanity had ever witnessed. 3,000 warships from 12 different races hung in the black beyond Neptune. Their arms powered and ready. Each vessel was able to erase a city. Together they could burn Earth to dust in hours. Admiral Ben Carter stood in the control room of Earth's Space Defense Post, watching the group on his battle display. He was old and weary, and his bones hurt from too many years of carrying secrets. But he was still a fighter, and fighters did not run from battles they could not win. The president had given him control of Earth's protection. It was not much of an honor. Earth had only 200 military ships, and most were built for patrol work rather than fighting against the Valanth group. They would last perhaps 15 minutes. But Ben had no plan to fight. He had studied Lisa Harper's findings about the Kthari. He grasped now that the lock on the Hollow's jail was powered by human feeling. War would create fear and rage and hatred. These feelings might make the lock stronger briefly, but over time they would harm something essential in the human spirit. Conflict would bring desperation. Desperation would bring the kind of cold, logical thinking that the Hollow desired. If humanity battled this war, they might win the fight and lose everything else. Jack Morrison had a different notion. He arrived at the defense post 12 hours before the Valanth deadline, bringing Lisa Harper and Danny Price with him. Danny had spent the past week working with the secret group that watched the Pacific anomaly. He had learned things that made him question everything he believed about science and reality. Jack shared his approach with Admiral Carter. If the lock was powered by human experience, then they must show the Valanth what humanity truly was. Not through arms, not through strength, through bond. Lisa had been working with Valanth scientists on a sending system that could reach across space. Normally, such systems could only carry facts, words, numbers, and pictures. But Lisa had found something in the Kthari files, a method for sending raw awareness itself. They could transmit human experience straight into the thoughts of every being in the group, not just facts about humans, the actual sensation of being human. Admiral Carter heard the approach. He was quiet for a long while, then he raised the clear question. If we reveal everything we are, they will witness our darkness too. Our cruelty, our ability for destruction. They might choose we are too dangerous to allow to live. Lisa nodded. That is the danger. But if we hide our darkness, we are not revealing the reality. We are revealing a lie, and lies will not protect us. Ben thought about his ancestor. George Carter had spent his entire life carrying the burden of a secret he could never share. He had died alone, his mind broken by what he understood. Ben had always wondered if things would have been different if George had been able to tell someone. If he had been able to share the weight, maybe that was what humanity required to do now. Share everything, the good and the bad, the brightness and the darkness. Trust that the reality would be enough. He gave the order to start the sending. Danny Price had changed the communication systems on every device circling Earth. Lisa Harper had written the program that would gather and send human awareness. Jack Morrison worked with leaders around the globe to prepare the population for what was about to occur. When the sending started, it was like nothing that had ever happened in human history. Billions of humans contributed their memories. A mother holding her newborn baby for the first time. A fighter saying farewell to his family before going to battle. A scientist finding something that would transform the world. A child learning to ride a bicycle. An old man recalling his wife who had died 30 years back. The signal held everything. Caring and hatred, happiness and sorrow, bravery and fear, the full span of human experience pressed into a wave that spread across the star system. Like ripples in a pond, the Valanth group received the wave and stopped. For the first time in their history, the member races of the Union felt what it meant to be human. They witnessed the chaos and the beauty. They grasped the contradictions. They felt the fierce drive to survive that burned in every human heart. They also felt something else, something that none of them had anticipated. They felt the lock deep in the signal, woven through every human memory, was the power that kept the Hollow captured. The Valanth could feel it now. A web of brightness and caring and desire that wrapped around the world like a blanket. A billion tiny flames burning against the darkness. They grasped at last why the Kthari dreaded humanity. It was not because humans were threatening. It was because humans were necessary. Without them, the lock would break. Without them, the Hollow would be loose. Without them, the entire galaxy would be erased by emptiness. The Valanth group powered down its arms, but the sending had an unexpected result. The power that humans created was meant to flow into the lock gradually over time. The sending had pressed billions of human experiences into a single moment. It was like pouring a river into a cup. The lock could not take it all at once, and the Hollow felt it. Deep under the Pacific, something that had rested for 60,000 years opened its eyes. The doorway that George Carter had discovered in 1947 started to crack. The symbols on its face flickered and dimmed. Danny Price was the first to notice the shift. His tools showed ground activity rising by 10 times, then 100, then 1,000. He looked at Lisa Harper with terror in his eyes. It is waking. Lisa grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the exit. Then we must move now. The Valanth group was no longer the threat. The real threat was rising from the depths, and humanity had only hours to stop it before everything they had made was erased from existence. The Pacific began to boil. Steam rose in huge columns that could be seen from space. The water heat near the Mariana Trench rose by 50 degrees in less than an hour. Vessels that were too near simply vanished, pulled down into depths that no longer followed the rules of nature. Then the disappearances started. On the coast of Japan, an entire fishing town ceased to exist, not ruined, not killed, erased. The buildings were gone. The people were gone. Even the memories of them were gone. Their families woke confused, sensing that something was missing, but unable to recall what. In Hawaii, tourists on a beach watched in horror as three of their friends simply winked out of being. One moment they were laughing and playing in the water. The next moment there was nothing. The tourists could not even recall their names. The hollow was dreaming, and its dreams were becoming real. Admiral Ben Carter watched the reports flooding into his control room. Every few minutes, another spot disappeared. Another piece of humanity was erased from the cosmos. The lock was failing faster than anyone had guessed. Lisa Harper had an approach, but it was desperate and risky. During her contact with the Kthari, she had learned something vital. The lock could be strengthened with focused human experience. The sending had overwhelmed it, but a targeted signal straight into the jail might restore its power. They required to deliver that signal in person. Danny Price had spent the past 3 days making a device that could hold and send human awareness. It was small enough to fit in a pack, powerful enough to hold the memories of 1 billion people. The sending had gathered those memories. Now they required someone to carry them into the center of the jail. Jack Morrison offered immediately. Ben Carter refused to allow him to go. "You are too young. You have too much life ahead. This mission requires someone who is ready to let go," Jack argued. But Ben was firm. The old admiral had been carrying the burden of this secret for decades. His father and ancestor had carried it before him. 3 generations of his family had devoted their lives to watching something they could never talk about. Now it was time to finish what George Carter had begun all those years back. Ben took the device from Danny and strapped it to his back. He embraced Lisa and shook Jack's hand. Then he boarded a vessel that would take him to the deepest spot on Earth. The Kthari appeared as his craft descended through the darkness. They showed themselves as points of crystal light that floated beside the vessel, guiding it through waters that had become twisted and wrong. Reality itself was breaking down around the jail. Ben saw things through his window that his mind could not handle. Patterns that existed in too many dimensions. Shades that had no names. Beings that might have been fish or might have been nightmares. The doorway appeared before him. It was exactly as his ancestor had described. Huge, ancient, filled with symbols that hurt to watch and cracked now, glowing with a sickly shine that pulsed in rhythm with something breathing on the far side. Ben left the vessel and swam toward the doorway. The pressure should have crushed him instantly, but the Kthari shielded him with their old power. He could hear the hollow now. Its whispers filled his mind, offering him peace if he would just stop fighting, offering him rest if he would just let go. Ben thought about his ancestor standing in this same spot nearly 400 years back. George Carter had been terrified. He had spent the rest of his life haunted by what he heard through that doorway, but he had not given up. He had not stopped fighting. He had passed the duty to his son, who had passed it to his son, who was now standing before the jail with the burden of humanity on his shoulders. Ben pressed his hand against the doorway. The whispers grew louder. The hollow knew he was there. It attempted to erase him, to remove him from existence the way it had removed those fishing towns and tourists and countless others throughout history. But Ben was not afraid. He had lived. He had loved his wife for 40 years before she passed. He had raised 3 children who had grown into good people. He had served his world with honor and dignity. He had laughed and cried and hoped and feared. He had been human in every way that mattered, and that was enough. He turned on the device on his back. The memories of billions flooded through him and into the jail. The happiness of children playing, the grief of funerals, the excitement of weddings, the quiet calm of reading a book on a rainy day, the fierce drive of athletes pushing beyond their limits, the gentle caring of parents watching their bobbies sleep. 60,000 years of human experience poured into the cracks in the lock. The shine from the doorway shifted from sickly yellow to brilliant white. The symbols that had been fading blazed with renewed strength. The hollow screamed. It was a sound that existed in dimensions humans could not sense. It rang through realities that had no names. And then it faded, growing quieter and quieter until there was only silence. The doorway was whole again. The lock was restored. The hollow had returned to its rest. Ben Carter floated in the darkness, too drained to move. The Kthari surrounded him with their crystal shine. They spoke to him one last time before they carried him back to the surface. You have done what your ancestors could not. You have strengthened the lock for another 10,000 years. Your race has proven itself worthy of the trust we placed in you so long back. Ben smiled. He was ready to rest now. But he had one more question. What happens in 10,000 years when the lock weakens again? The Kthari's answer filled him with peace. Humanity will still be there, and they will do what they have always done. They will dream, they will hope, they will fight, and the galaxy will be protected because of them. 1 year later, the Valanth Collective formally recognized Earth as the most vital world in the galaxy. Humanity was given a seat on the High Council, not as a member race. As Guardians, Danny Price became the director of a new group dedicated to watching the lock and understanding the hollow. Lisa Harper wrote the history of what had occurred so that future generations would remember. Jack Morrison returned to space, sharing the story of humanity with every race he met. And deep under the Pacific, the doorway remained shut. The hollow slept, but humanity did not. They dreamed, they hoped, they fought, they loved, and the galaxy was protected because of it.